Okay, perhaps we should make a start. Welcome. This is a webinar on next steps, age 32, explore the new data. Today we're going to take you through some of the features of the age 32 data and how to get started using it. And I'm very delighted to have you here with us today. Welcome. My name is Morag Henderson. I'm the director of the Next Steps study. And today you're going to get some presentations from Dr. Alison Fang-Wei Wu, who's the Next Steps study researcher, Dr. Liam Wright, who's a lecturer in statistics, Sarah Brihal, who's the Next Steps data manager, and Bożena Wilgoszkowska, who is a senior research fellow working at CLS across Next Steps and many of the other studies. So welcome. So let me give you a little agenda. I'm going to give you a brief overview of Next Steps. Then Alison is going to take you through the age 32 specific survey contents. Liam's going to discuss the sample design, features, attrition, and weight. Then Sarab's going to discuss the data structure and documentation. I'll give you an overview on how to access the data. And then we've got two really exciting presentations, really as sort of demonstrator papers to showcase the research opportunities available using the Next Steps data, specifically the new data, the age 32 sweep. And we've got Bożena, who will discuss her work with others on women's pay penalty and job quality. And then Alison's going to talk about the relationship between work and health. And then, as I've mentioned, we'll move to the question section to answer any questions you have about the data or your research. So again, please use the chat function for any questions that you have, and we'll come to those at the end. So very briefly then, we are the Centre for Longitudinal Studies, and we are home to 4 of the national core longitudinal studies, but we have affiliation with many others. And these studies follow the lives of tens of thousands of people, many of whom from birth all the way through to adulthood. These are large nationally representative groups of people born in a given year. And the advantage of collecting information from the same people over time is that we can answer really important research questions about how exposures in adolescence, for example, might influence outcomes in adulthood. For example, bullying in adolescence and mental health in adulthood. So these are the 4 studies that we house at the Centre for Longitudinal Studies. National Child Development Study were born in 1958 in the same week, and the initial sample was over 17,000. The British Cohort Study were born in 1970, and again, born in the same week in Great Britain, and there's around 17,000 participants. The feature of today is Next Steps, and they were born in 1989-90, and we follow the lives of over 16,000 of those, not from birth in this case, but from adolescence. And we also have the Millennium Cohort Study, who were born at the turn of millennia, and there are over 19,000 participants. So a little bit about Next Steps. It began in 2004 when the study members were in year 9, so they were sort of turning age 14. They were surveyed annually for the first 7 sweeps of the data up until 2010. And then there was a break in the study, and then we revisited them at age 25. And this most recent sweep available is age 32 data. In addition to those main sweeps, those main 9 sweeps, we have COVID-19 sweeps of data. That was sort of 3 sweeps of COVID-specific information collected and their living conditions during COVID over that period. And so we have this really interesting cross-cohort comparison opportunity because those COVID-19 sweeps were also replicated across the other 3 studies that we house. And the most recent data sweep took place between April 2022 and September 2023. And that data, as I said, is now available for researchers to download and use, and it's available at the UK Data Service. And I'll say a little bit more about access later on today. The history of Next Steps is slightly different to our other cohort studies that we have. It was previously run by what we now call the Department for Education, and it had a strong focus on education transitions and transitions to the labour market. In 2013, it came to CLS, and we restarted that study in early adulthood. And so from age 25 onwards, the study itself has become much more multidisciplinary in line with our other CLS cohorts. So it's a bit more holistic in terms of life experiences and captures aspects like health, mental health, as well as education and labour market transitions. We're now looking and interested in family formation and cognitive ability across the life course. So at age 32, the sweep continues to focus on all of these different life experiences as they navigate young, a relative term, young adulthood, and captured during a cost of living crisis. So there's lots of interesting things to examine. We know that adulthood trajectories are more diverse than ever. People are sort of boomerang generations moving back in with their parents, and they may be delaying becoming parents themselves for many reasons. And so this data allows us to really answer some of those questions empirically. We know that some have become parents, some have got more established careers, maybe saving for a house or taking on more responsibility, and they might also have increased coping strategies. But again, there's lots of variation there, so this data allows us to examine some of those questions. Why is it important? Well, it's sometimes called the missing cohort. It fills the gap between the BCS 70 and the Millennium cohort study. So otherwise, without next steps, we wouldn't really be able to understand the experiences of people in England born in the early 1990s. This generation experienced some unique challenges. They were the first who faced some of the highest student debt. They entered the labour market during the Great Recession, which meant increased job precarity for many and erosion of workplace rights. And they've encountered a really challenging housing market. So these pressures may shape the unique health and social impact on this generation. And Next Steps is the only major national longitudinal study that focuses on pathways through teenage years and transitions into adulthood. And we hope to follow them for many, many more years. So this is a quick overview of what the study looks like, I guess a stylized version. So each column captures the information collected at each age. So as I mentioned, we've got 9 sweeps of data. The first 7 were collected annually, and the most recent 2 were spaced around 7 years apart. The study member reports all of their everything at each of the sweep, but we also have parents' reports for the first 4 sweeps of data. Linked data, the Next Steps is linked to the National People Database, the sort of census for school attainment. It's also linked to the individualised learning record. We have linkages to the hospital episode statistics and the student loans company as well. And we've sought consent across many other data sources, administrative data sources, and we're constantly negotiating with those sources to update those linked data. You'll see there the sample size by sweep and an overview of the response rate as well. And just before I hand over to Alison, just to flag some of the specialist features of Next Steps, the data linkage I've mentioned, these ones are already available. More data linkages are underway, and those will be announced on the website. We also have the geospatial data linkage opportunity. The geospatial data is available at the UK Data Service and directly from the Centre for Longitudinal Studies. And this would allow you to link information, let's say crime level data or weather-based data to specific geospatial identifiers within Next Steps. And lastly, at age 32, the saliva from cohort members was captured and subsequently genotyped. So we now have some genetic data available for specialist researchers for over 1,500 of our cohort members, which captures over 8 million genetic variants. So there's more information about some of those specialist features on the CLS website, and feel free to ask any questions today if you have them. But now I'll hand over to Alison, who's going to take you through the specific age 32 survey contents.
Everyone, I'm a research fellow for the Next Step. I'll give you a bit more details about the data includes. I will first describe all the topics in each theme and then highlight those new measures in this particular sweep. Okay, so Next Step was set up to record adolescent school life and the experience of transitions to adulthood to reflect education and work-related policies. But it has now been extended to cover a wide range of life aspects, such as relationship, identity, social participation, and health. By providing more diverse measures, the elements of existing themes have also been deepened. So Maura already mentioned some of the field work, but I'm quickly go through this. So the most recent survey sweep, the Sweep 9 fieldwork took place between May 2022 and September 2023. We used mixed method approach to interview our cohort members. We approached those who did not opt out, were not in prison, and not traceable, and were still alive, resulting in 13,859 individuals being invited, and among them around 7,300 participated. And their data will be has been available on UKDS. You can check our technical reports and user guide if you are interested in any method or relevant information. Okay, so this section is to whet your appetites by themes, discipline. This is by no means extensive or exhaustive, but meant to give you ideas about the relationship between variables and possible control variables. So here are the subjects areas I'm going to discuss in a bit more detail. You might consider these to be your main explanatory variable of interest or your main dependent variable of interest. So for example, you might want to look at the relationship between mental health and work, marital status and earning. So here I'll highlight this area, and that's were expanded in Sweep 9, but we have more themes in next step. Of course, you can look at the survey questionnaire for a specific measure. So first is the family relationship and children information. So in this table, we have measured that's were only for cohort members, parents. So you can see the cross sign. So for example, the cohort members' parents were asked about household compositions between age 14 and 17. And we also have questions only for the cohort members. So for example, since cohort members grow older, they may start to start their own family. So we ask questions about for their cohort members to report their new household compositions at age 20 to 32. And we also have questions for both. So like household responsibilities and resources at age 14 to 16. And most measures were collected in previous sweep, but in sweep 9, we have two new measures on homeless and adverse childhood experience. So homeless measures were about the past homeless experience after 16, such as when, who, and where the condition happened. And second is adverse childhood experiences were retrospective questions about whether cohort members have ever experienced adverse experience before age 16, such as poor finances, poor health, and in-home violence. So we already have in-depth measures of employment and finance, but in Sweep 9, we added two additional timing aspects, including job quality, economic shock experience since COVID-19 pandemic, and financial literacy. So here are more details. In terms of job quality, we look at security, satisfaction, and stress at work. As for economic shock, we asked about cohort members and their partners experiencing COVID-19 pandemic and when that happened. Financial literacy assesses one's understanding of using their finance. So in the physical health sections, we already asked questions about physical health, and in Sweep 9, we included more, and including DNA from the saliva sample. We also considering the life course related and timely topics, we included pregnancy and fertility experience and coronavirus experience. So in Sweep 9, we already asked cohort members about past pregnancy. In Sweep 9, we explored their future intentions, fertility treatment, and obstacles to pregnancy. Although COVID experience were measures in the COVID survey, we also asked more information here. We have saliva sample in our new suite, which allows more diverse research topics to be explored. We also have already asked questions about mental health and well-being, and in Sweep 9, we included more standardized mental health scales such as grit, social support, and cognition task, the backward digit sequence test. So we have used general health questionnaires to measure the cohort members' psychological distress, and now we have included more measures to capture more aspects of mental health and well-being, such as anxiety, depression, and loneliness. Social support reflects their connections with direct social environments, and GRID is a standardized questionnaire that's captured one's passions and persuasion. And finally, the backward digit sequence test was for working memory and concentration ability. As the cohort members grow older, their identity and participation play important role in their life, which has been reflected in our survey. We now included their nationality, social attitude, and social support. We also measure their personality as part of their characteristics. So you can see here, the identity includes the importance of ethnicity, national identity, European identity, and birthplace. Social attitudes reflect the topics that are relevant to our current society, so like right to abortions and immigration, etc. And for Big Five is a standardized questionnaire for measuring personality. Okay, so now I'm heading to the next sections for the sample design and weights.
Hello, I'm Liam Wright. I'm a lecturer in statistics at the Centre for Longitudinal Studies. Let me just make this full screen. So in this section, I will discuss the design of the Next Steps survey, response rates across its 9 main sweeps, and methods to account for attrition from the study. Next Steps was designed to represent individuals who are in Year 9 of secondary school in England in February 2004. The study comprises two samples. A main sample of 15,770 individuals recruited in Sweep 1 and an ethnic boost sample of 352 Black African or Black Caribbean individuals recruited in Sweep 4. The main sample was recruited using a two-stage complex sampling design. Schools were first selected and multiple pupils were then recruited from these selected schools. Schools with high numbers of children eligible for free school meals or with large numbers of ethnic minority students were oversampled, and within selected schools, individuals with ethnic minority backgrounds were oversampled too. There is some further nuance to this, for instance, regarding the recruitment of students from private schools. More information on this can be found in the user guide. Not all invited schools cooperated with the study, nor did every sampled student cooperate from a cooperating school. The boost sample differed from the main sample in that participants were recruited from schools that did not cooperate in Sweep 1. As with any longitudinal study, participation in Next Steps has decreased over time. 7,279 individuals were productive at the later sweep, approximately 45% of the total recruited sample. For the first 7 sweeps, the study, with few exceptions, tracked only those who had responded in the prior sweep. Responses in these sweeps were therefore largely monotonic. If a participant was observed in Sweep 6, it is very likely that they were observed in Sweeps 1 to 5 too. If a person dropped out in Sweep 2, they are unlikely to appear in Sweep 4. In Sweeps 8 and Sweep 9, efforts were instead made to invite all participants who were alive and resident in the UK, regardless of prior non-response. Consequently, a sizable fraction of participants are missing in some prior sweeps. For instance, 23% of Sweep 9 respondents did not participate in Sweep 8. Approximately 26% of the overall sample has participated in all sweeps, and approximately 27% have exhibited a non-monotonic response pattern over time. Unequal selection into the study, non-random attrition from it, and non-monotonic response patterns within it mean that observed data is unlikely to be representative of the population from which Next Steps is drawn. That is, individuals who were in Year 9 of secondary school in England in February 2004. Methods are required to achieve representativeness, and here we will highlight two: weighting and multiple imputation. Weights to restore sample representativeness have been created for each sweep and are supplied with the data. These account for both the design of the survey and attrition from it. We also supply a survey weight with the Sweep 9 data. The target population for this weight, that is the population the weight is designed to reflect, is the initial Next Steps population who are alive and not in prison in 2022-2023. Researchers using these weights should consider what the population they want to reflect is. In some cases, creating your own bespoke weight may be necessary. Further detail on the survey weight is provided in the user guide. Researchers should also account for the complex survey design in analyses by including the primary sampling unit and stratum identifier variables that are supplied with the data. On screen is some example data code to do this. We have, I believe, some R code in the user guide too. Accounting for the complex survey design is necessary to obtain standard errors that appropriately account for the non-independence of pupils from a school. That is, that multiple pupils were recruited from each school. Beside weights, we also recommend that researchers consider using multiple imputation to address missing data in Next Steps, particularly given the item missingness and non-monotonic response pattern observed. CLS has created some user-friendly guidance on this method that I've displayed on screen now. Thank you, and it's over to Sarab.
So for this session, we'll be talking about what data and documentation is available, the content and structure of the data, how to access this information, and any changes that have taken place.
So sorry.
So we go to the next slide, which is the list of data sets. So this table contains a list of the data sets available for download for Sweep 9 of Next Steps. You can see here a summary of the contents of each data set, its structure, i.e. whether it's flat or a hierarchical file, and the IDs used to uniquely identify cases in the data set. Where applicable, the name of the file indicates the survey content of the data set. It's important that when datasets are downloaded, they should be used in combination with the accompanying user guide and questionnaire. The main interview file captures modules 1 to 8, which includes household relationships, housing, activities in employment, finance, educational qualifications and health, as well as the aggregated cognitive assessment scores. It also includes the self-completion aspect of the survey, the content of which includes the Big 5 personality questions about trust, resilience, mental health, and life satisfaction. This is a flat file, which means there will be one record per cohort member. The other files listed are mainly hierarchical in structure, and cases are uniquely identified by 2 or more identifiers, i.e. the main research ID and 1 or more secondary identifiers. Datasets include those captured in the household module, pregnancy histories, finance, and trial level cognitive assessment scores from the BDS test. There are also flat datasets. One contains the derived variables across various modules to facilitate researcher analysis. And the longitudinal file is the other one, which contains sample weights and outcome variables for sweeps 1 to 9. So moving on, all the datasets listed in the previous slide are available to download from the UKDS under End User License. Where applicable, the naming and structure of the datasets are consistent with the Age 25 survey, for example, the main interview file. This dataset contains the majority of the survey data, including the self-completion responses. New to age 32 is the way the household grids are reported. The person grid is comprised of 5 separate loops. The partner grid, 2 child grids, those previously reported in the age 25 survey, and those newly reported in age 32, and 2 other household grids, those reported in age 25 and new members in the household. In age 25, the partner, child, and household grids were reported separately. So for structure, the flat file The flat file format consists of one record for each cohort member and is straightforward to merge with other flat files using the research identifier NSID. In addition, there are a number of hierarchical datasets which contain multiple records for a single cohort member. These datasets consist of responses to questions where the respondent is asked a set of questions which are repeated until no more information is required. The person grid can be merged to the pregnancy histories dataset and other household datasets using the grid ID secondary index. So to conventions, the order in which variables appear in the datasets broadly follows the order of modules and sections within modules as documented in the questionnaire. Variable names in the dataset are based on those documented in the questionnaire. In the datasets, these variable names are prefixed with W9, denoting the sweep of the cohort study and consistent with previous sweeps. Variables in the derived variable dataset have been given the prefix of W9D, followed by the variable name. For multi-coded variables where a single question produces more than one response, a suffix has been used to identify the iteration. Therefore, 0A, B, C, etc. has been used to denote the first, second, third iterations, respectively. Variable labels give an indication of the question content. Conventions include a common prefix for multi-coded variables based on questionnaire content, for example, academic qualifications obtained. Labels for derived variables are prefixed with DV. Missing values are consistently labelled as follows: -9 for refused, -8 has been used for don't know or insufficient information, -1 has been used for the value, -1 has been used for not applicable. Additionally, -2 has been used for script error, and -3 used for questions not completed because the cohort members completed the short version of the questionnaire. And finally, the derived variables data file has been updated with some newly derived variables categorized under the household and education sections. These include number of own children in the household aged 12 and above, the total number of children in the household or absent, total number of own children in the household or absent, and for the education, highest qualification level from an academic qualification reported in age 32, and the highest qualification level from a vocational qualification reported in age 32, containing 8 levels in total. The longitudinal data file has been updated and a single weight variable has been renamed in line with previous sweeps. And finally, the derived variables user guide has been merged into the main user guides and can be accessed via Appendix 1. So Maura, back to you for information on accessing the data.
So hopefully you'll have found the Next Steps website portion of the Centre for Longitudinal Studies website. You'll see here that there's information on sweep-specific details, popular documentation, some initial findings, and some recent publications using the data. The main thing is popular documentation, which includes the user guides that Sarab and others have mentioned. These include the overview of the measures, including the derived variables, as well as our recommendations regarding weights and handling non-response. The questionnaire is available from that Next Steps page, including the exact question wording, question routing, and variable names. So it's a useful way to sort of search what's available within the data. I should say the questionnaire is both on the CLS website and on the UK Data Service website, where you can download the data and start using it. There's also some data notes, variable lists, and derived variables in that data documentation section, as well as the technical report, which captures much more detail on sample questionnaire design development and the field work specific response, as well as things like ethics and other aspects. You can search through previous journal publications on the Centre for Longitudinal's website bibliography page, so you can select by Next Steps study and see what work has been recently published using Next Steps, as well as seeing some initial findings from the age 32 suite, which we'll soon move on to. And then lastly, there's a link here to the cohort profile, which again captures a really detailed overview of not just the age 32 suite, but Next Step study as a whole and the measures within it. So these resources are available to help you begin your experience using Next Steps. We've all mentioned, I think, that the data is freely available to researchers, government analysts and third sector workers. You just need to have an account at the UK Data Service, log on and search the data catalogue with Next Steps as the title, and you should be able to see all of the resources there, including the most recent sweep of data. When you download the data, you'll get a folder with lots of useful documentation and information alongside that, so that information's there. There's also secure access for some of the linked administrative data, so if you require some of the specialist or secure data, you may need to do some additional training, but you can access all of that information at the UK Data Service, again by searching for Next Steps. Okay, so I think that's everything in terms of the data overview. We're now going to move to sort of highlighting some of the real research opportunities you have using Next Steps, and just we've got two paper presentations. First with Bojena and some of her co-authors' work, which looks at women's pay, penalty and job quality. So Bojena, I'll hand over to you if you're ready.
So hello everyone, and I'll tell you about the briefing paper that together with my colleagues who are listed here, we have been working on using the Next Steps age 32 data. And this piece of research followed from a larger project where we used the British cohort studies to investigate how the gender pay gap evolves over the life course and across generations. So to give you a bit of context, here are two graphs showing the overall trends in aggregate data, where the vertical axis shows the percentage gender wage gap. So the gaps of, say, 20% means that women's median pay is 20% lower than men's, or in other words, women earn on average ATP for every pound earned by a man. And here you can see that the gap has been decreasing over time for all age groups, generally being smaller for younger people, and it generally peaks around the late 30s, early 40s. The participants of Next Step study have been interviewed at age 32, so we would expect, based on this data, for the pay gap to be around 10%. But these graphs are both based on the same data set, which is the annual survey of hours and earnings, and its predecessor, the new earnings survey, which are great for showing the overall trends, but they don't have the information about people's characteristics, circumstances, and jobs that they work in, which is why we need to look into other studies, such as the cohort studies. And the motivation for this research is mainly that, as you have seen, the gender pay gap have been decreasing over time, but the progress has slowed in recent years, and the pay gaps are quite stubborn. So we would really like to better understand why these pay gaps persist. And in the past, that commonly proposed explanation was that women were less educated than men on average, which is no longer the case. Women have now caught up with or even overtaken men in terms of education, so that explanation is no longer plausible. And we know that Next Steps cohort is highly educated and highly economically active compared to previous cohorts. We also see that the peak of the pay gap over the life course tends to correspond in time of family formation, and previous studies show that given the bulk of childcare and domestic responsibilities still falls on women, they tend to switch to part-time work once they have children, which is related to pay penalty, as part-time work is generally less well paid per hour compared to full-time work. So what we set out to do is to explore why these pay gaps persist, how they vary between those who have and don't have children, and to what extent the individual and job characteristics can account for the differences in pay. In other words, to see what the plausible explanations for these differences are. And another unique feature of Next Steps data is that participants were asked questions about the self-perceived job quality, which allows us to test another theory that has been proposed in the literature, that of compensating pay differentials. And this theory suggests that women may accept lower pay in return for non-monetary perks, such as having jobs that are more fulfilling, less stressful, or more enjoyable. So the four groups we are interested in comparing are men and women with and without children. as well as mothers and fathers. And looking at their economic activity data, we already observe some differences. Although this cohort is, as I said, very economically active compared to previous generations, at this age, over 3/4 of people in all groups are in paid work. However, mothers already stand out. They're more likely to work part-time and much more likely to look after family as their main activity as compared to other groups. And looking at their occupational classification, so the top types of jobs that they do, we see some evidence of occupational segregation, which can be a contributing factor in terms of gender pay gap. As you can see, parents are slightly less likely to work in higher status occupations than men and women without children. But the gender differences amongst these higher status occupations are not large, even though the pay gaps are generally larger at the top of the earnings distribution. However, there were larger gender differences in occupations associated with lower status jobs. For example, women in general were more likely to work in administrative and secretarial occupations than men, and mothers in particular were more likely to work in caring, leisure, and other services. At the same time, men, especially fathers, were more likely than women to work in skilled trades occupations or as process plant and machine operatives. We then turn to the job quality, and here you can see the differences across the 4 groups in the extent to which employers motivate them to give their best performance. They have good prospects for career advancements, they feel they're doing useful work, and their job satisfaction. And as you can see, most people in all groups work in jobs that they see as relatively good. So this compensating differential theory argues that men are paid more because they do more undesirable jobs, while women value non-monetary perks, and if they have these perks, they're willing to accept a lower pay. And if that was true, we would expect to see women and mothers having jobs with maybe lower but better quality subjectively work, but we don't find a lot of differences across our groups in terms of these indicators. One indicator where we do find differences is work stress. However, here we would expect women to do less stressful work. We actually find the opposite is true. Women more likely to find their works more often, always or often stressful. 45% of mothers and 53% of women without children said they were often or always stressed at work, compared to 38% of fathers and 41% of men without children. And this also suggests that gender differences in work stress are not just driven by motherhood or by mothers juggling work and childcare. And we finally look at pay differences. So here again, you can see the 4 groups, with men without children being the reference category, which is reflected by the dotted line at 1. So each dot and the associated whiskers, which are the confidence intervals, represent the ratio of the given the pay of the given group compared to men without children. So if the whiskers overlap with the dotted line, the pay of that group is not significantly different from that of men without children. And if the dot and whiskers fall to the left of the dotted line, that group earns less than men without children. And on the horizontal axis, you can see the pay ratios. So the ratio of 0.9 indicates 10% pay penalty, and the ratio of 0.8 indicates 20% pay penalty, and so on. So we have estimates for 3 models: the purple ones, which are unadjusted, blue ones, which are adjusted for individual characteristics that you can see listed here, and the green ones, which are also adjusted for the job characteristics. And maybe starting from fathers at the bottom of the plot, we can see that their pay is slightly lower than that of men without children. However, once we account for the individual and job characteristics, these differences are no longer statistically significant. Then for women with no children at the top, the ratios from unadjusted models are similar to those of fathers. However, in this case, accounting for individual and job characteristic actually increases the differences in pay, which remain significantly different from 0 in all of our models. And for mothers here in the middle, the unadjusted gaps are largest and slightly close when accounting for individual characteristics, but slightly open up again when we account for job characteristics. And here again, as in the case of women without children, they remain statistically significant. So to sum up, Next Steps is highly educated and highly economically active cohort, although mothers but not fathers are more likely to work part-time and look after family. Unadjusted differences show that pay gap is present, with women earning around £2 less than men on average, and the gap is even larger for parents, with mothers earning around £3 less on average than fathers. Women, especially those with no children, also find their work more stressful, and a rich set of individual and job characteristics doesn't explain the differences in pay. Even when we account for individual and job characteristics, women without children still earn 9% less, and mothers earn 16% less than men without children. And here are some links to further resources related to this piece of research. So that was one of the examples how next step can be used in research and hopefully to enhance greater gender equality. So thank you very much for your attention, and please let me know if you have any questions. And now over to Alison, who will tell you about the research on work and health.
Okay, in these sections, I will demonstrate an opportunity that use next step to explore the association between work and health. So this study aims to understand the association between work and health among age 32 adults in England. We're particularly interested in whether previous health links to higher risk of not working, including unemployed and inactive at age 32. So unemployed means that those who are not working but seeking work, whilst inactive are those who are sick, disabled, in education training, look after home, or doing voluntary work. So give you a little bit background. Currently in the UK, we have around 12% of 25 to 40 age population is not working. A big challenge in current labor market is health. A recent statistic showing that the number of people being inactive for health reasons has peaked since 1993. So as you can see here. Existing studies indicated that previous health problems, including long-term illness, general health, and mental health, are associated with later labor market participation. Although the strength varied across different health dimensions. Also, studies using a life course perspective suggested that both timing and accumulative of health problems could be key to later participation. However, this perspective has not been widely tested. So in this study, I will explore the current activities and their health amongst age 32 population in England. I will also examine whether health conditions associated across different stages. Finally, the association between health and labor market participation are tested. So I used the data about work and health and selected some covariates in sweep 1, 2, 3, 4, 8, and 9. So this is the overview, but I will present the summary table in the next slides. So here we define different stages at a specific period. So childhood is the period that before age 16, which includes informations between sweep 1 and 3, and also a retrospective measures at age 32. Adolescence is age 16, sweep 4. Early adulthood is age 25, sweep 8, and current adulthood is age 32 and sweep 9. The outcome is their economic activities. The independent variables are the previous health, including long-term illness, self-reported general health, and mental health in childhood, adolescence, and early adulthood. We control for gender, ethnicity, parents' occupation level, and education, their highest achieved education, previous economic activity, and current health. We also use multiple imputation to address the missingness. So this is the current economic activities among this population. So our results show that most of our sample are working, and around 17 was not working, which is slightly higher than the national statistics, which may stem from the oversampling people from deprived backgrounds in our sample. And our results show that majority were in good health, and around 30% of our sample had long-term illness or mental health at age 32. with women reporting more health problem. And the last people in our sample reported poor mental health, which not varied across gender. And these are the correlation metrics show that all health at different stage were positively correlated with health at other stages. So here are the results of the association between health at different stages and economic activity at age 32. And so here we compared unemployed, inactive with the employed. So the middle line means there's no significant difference. So you can see that after adjusted for covariates, the long-term illness in 3 stages was associated with increasing risk of being inactive but not being employed. After adjusted for covariates, the general health in childhood and early adulthood was associated with increasing risk of being inactive. Regarding the risk of being unemployed, only poor health in early adulthood was associated with increasing likelihood after adjusted for covariates. And for mental health, after adjusted for covariates, mental health problems is all 3 stages were not associated with the likelihood of being inactive. Regarding an unemployed risk, only mental health problem in early adulthood was associated with increasing risk of being unemployed at age 32. So overall, and in this study, we found that 70% of our sample was unemployed at age 32. This might be because we oversample people from disadvantaged background. Good news, most participants reported good health. Our correlation metrics also shows that health at different stage links to health at other stages. This is in line with previous studies. And as for association between previous health and current work, we found that after controlling for other potential confounders, inactive individuals might experience more health problems previously, such as long-term illness and poor general health than employed individuals. Unemployed individuals may experience more mental health problems in their adolescence than employed individuals.
Thank you all. Hopefully that was a useful overview of next steps as a study, age 32 specifically, the weights, the attrition, the documentation, design, and how to access, as well as some examples of some research